How's it going? Brock Ashby here. Welcome to the Better with Brock podcast. In today's episode, we have an awesome guest that I've wanted on the podcast for a minute. His name is Dr. Mike Israetel, or also known as Dr. Mike. He's the co-founder of Renaissance Periodization, or RP. He's a sports scientist. He's hilarious. He's a no BS personal trainer, online personal trainer. He's an author. And he's a really smart coach that I've learnt under, not face-to-face, person-to-person. I've bought his stuff online and learnt what he has to share to personal trainers. In today's episode, we cover celebrity workouts and the Hollywood fitness industry overall, the stimulus to fatigue ratio, which is something that he invented, you could say, or he coined, and how it applies to your training. And also, he kind of opened my eyes to how it applies to other areas in life too. We talk about the eccentric reps and the important part that they play in muscle building and injury prevention. If you don't know what the eccentric rep is, it's a portion of the rep that we do when we're working out, but you will have a more depth explanation as you listen to the podcast and we answer the question. We also talk about joint pain management in Jiu Jitsu. This seems like a very niche question, but Dr. Mike, he's a brown belt and I'm a blue belt, and something that I've struggled with ever since I've started Jiu Jitsu is elbow pain, elbow tendonitis when I roll and when I lift weights, and it kind of affects how I perform in the gym, and I wanted to get his opinion on how he would get around that, and he unpacks that as well. Dr. Mike is an awesome dude. If you don't follow him, check him out. He explains where you can follow him at the end of the podcast. Let's get straight into it.
Dr. Mike Israetel, I have a PhD in sport physiology from East Tennessee State University. I'm a professor of exercise and sports science, and I'm a co-founder of Renaissance Periodization, which is a company that we do coaching, we have apps, we do digital products, we do a lot of information stuff. I'm on YouTube talking about stuff all the time, and I'm a competitive bodybuilder and competitive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grappler, and I'm sure I'm leaving something out, but that's just about the gist of it.
I've been watching your YouTube channel a lot recently. Have you really ramped up your posting on YouTube, or is that just what I'm seeing now? Because I feel like there's new videos almost daily, and they're lengthy, 30 to 45 minutes sometimes.
Yeah. We've been doing that for some time, but about a year ago we increased the amount of videos we're putting out. Just by one. We used to put out 4 videos a week, and I think it's about 5. But
Wow.
We're also putting out kind of videos that are slightly more popular, less technical, and more comedic in nature. And so I think those have caused a rise in our popularity on YouTube. So that may be why you get more of me in the recommendation algorithm.
Yeah, I think judging by the comment section, people are much more excited about that. You're like kind of pulling apart celebrity workouts. And that's one thing I wanted to actually ask you about. Why do you think there's so much fluff and so much, I don't know, shit that doesn't really make sense in the celebrity workout Hollywood area, where I feel like this could be an opportunity for people, even like yourself? Like, I'm sitting there wondering, why isn't Dr. Mike training these people?
Yeah.
Like, why is there so much, they have unlimited resource, they have unlimited access to potentially great coaches. Why is there so much bullshit in the, I guess, Hollywood fitness industry?
Yeah. Because they don't have unlimited resources, and one of the biggest resources is, you can generally term it as intelligence, but really a more specific terminology would be the knowledge and wisdom to select the best person to contract for a given job. So for example, like, you're very successful in your own right, and when you hire people to fix the roof in your house, or you hire someone to fix your sink because it's broken, how good are you at ascertaining who the best people are to fix your roof, or who the best people are to clean your sink? How much do you know about evidence-based roof making, and who really the leaders in the field are, but who's really just really good at marketing? And you're like, well, yeah, this roofing company that my friends used, it seems okay, good enough, seems like it checks the boxes. And so if you don't know a lot about plumbing or a lot about roofing, even if you're smart and have lots of money and lots of fame and influence, you can make very terrible mistakes in selection. I mean, imagine if The Rock or something bought like a muscle car and like a Dodge Challenger or something, and a lot of technical car people would be like, dude, my God, for your money, you could have bought something so much more effective and so much more comfortable for your needs. And actually, even the model of Challenger you got, you didn't even mod it properly. And then you would ask them, well, how would he know that? So when celebrities make not so great choices in their workouts, they make not so great choices in a variety of other endeavors. I mean, we could judge them all the way down the line. There's celebrities that, they get caught in pictures just walking around Hollywood and their fashion is terrible. They just look like homeless people or something. And people who are at the high end of fashion be like, literally this person has access to the best fashion designers in the world. Why wouldn't they get a tailor to just make their stuff? It's nominally pricey to them. And say, well, this is a human being who makes choices based on the same kind of bullshit heuristics the rest of us do. And celebrities are known for many things, but a much higher degree of analytical thinking or raw intelligence or respect for science. This is not one of them. Like Ashton Kutcher. Is he like some kind of like Sam Harris in disguise? No, absolutely not. So, you would not expect them to make evidence-based choices. So when people ask how come celebrities often has such terrible workouts, well, they're just kind of a cross-section of the rest of America. Most Americans and most Australians and most New Zealanders, you've been to the gym before, they're doing dumb shit all the time. And celebrities are just like everybody else.
I actually went to school in New Zealand. I moved over to Australia. And yeah, even that, I went to one of the... It was like a prestigious high school. A lot of All Blacks came out there. I originally went there for rugby. And yeah, I was still doing... I was 14 years old when I started. I was trying to shrug 200 kilos just because that's what
Everyone tried that, yeah.
Lower back pinching, but that's what the first 15 rugby boys were doing, so that's what I was doing as well.
That's it. You got to get it done. Exactly. So, celebrities are just like famous people, man. When you see a celebrity drunk and getting pushed into a limo by his driver because he's just yelling racial absurdities, you're never like, how could this celebrity have, why is he, such a terrible drunk? It's just that's what they do, celebrities get into all kinds of crazy shit because they're just normal people. So when you tell someone who's normal but has a shitload of money, pick a trainer, they're often going to do the same things most of us do. I don't know anything about computers. If I go into a computer store, I just whatever the salesman says to me that sounds somewhat reasonable, as long as it checks my goals of I can do PowerPoint on this, yeah, I'll buy it. And a lot of times evidence-based computer people could be like, oh my God, Mike, I thought you knew better. It's what? I didn't. So celebrities don't have any kind of special insight, I don't think. And a lot of times it's the studio will recommend someone or their friends will recommend someone. And a lot of the ways that recommendations occur is based on human characteristics, human qualities. If you train with a trainer that's just really cool and down to earth and really funny, and a couple of other celebrities have trained with him before, you'll get him as a recommendation. You'll meet him and you'll think, this guy's great. And when he explains to you why we're doing certain things, it all sounds plausible. The core is really important. Okay, of course it is. It's the middle of my body. How could it be not unimportant? If you said, the pinkies were very important, you'd be like, okay, that's strange. But all the stuff passes the smell test generally if you just have no idea what you're looking for. If someone was to talk to you about hey, pick a great store for floral arrangements. What makes a good floral arrangement? You'd be like, I have no fucking clue. And someone who's maybe good, maybe not good at floral arrangements could tell you, it's really about color balance and symmetry. And some kind of flowers generally people like to see in the middle, some kind of flowers on the outside of an arrangement. You'd be like, okay,
sounds legit.
Great. And you look through their Instagram and they got pretty flowers on every picture, and you're like, it looks pretty to me. So think about the average trainer doing stupid exercises. He's got some clients with good genetics that worked hard at it long enough. They got great results. You're like, yeah, it's going to be me. So that's it.
Yeah. One thing that I've watched you critique some of those workouts, and even just what I learned from you in general first was you're a huge fan of the slow eccentric, of the big stretch. And I'd love you to kind of talk about each portion of the rep, eccentric, isometric, concentric, with focus on the eccentric, because actually I posted a workout the other day and some person posted I appreciate you doing slow eccentrics. It was a really niche comment, I guess.
Very niche.
Yeah. I appreciate your slow eccentrics. A lot of fitness influencers just drop it down and then, they're pushing heavy weight. But yeah, why is it so important? And what's the difference between the eccentric and, the isometric or concentric?
Yes, the first thing I'll say, it's not very important. It's just a little bit important.
Okay.
But it's one of these things that if you know it and you do it, it's such a huge trade-off in the side of the beneficial, and there's almost no downside, that it's kind of like a real easy thing that you can do. I'll give you what's a good analogy. If you're cooking food, but you've never used like salt, onions, or garlic, and people are going to be like, dude, it's not rocket science. Just do it. And you're like, why? What's the complex reasoning? You're like, it's just going to make your food taste better. And you try it, you're like, oh, and these things are so cheap and it's so easy to put them in food. What have I been doing my whole life? Now, can you eat food without onions, garlic, and salt? Yeah. Can you have food taste pretty good? Sure, there's ways of doing that. But like, why go out of the way? So the eccentric research seems to indicate that it might be a little bit more of all the three parts of the movement, the eccentric being the way down, the isometric being at the top or bottom of the lift, and the concentric being on the way up. The eccentric seems to be probably a little bit more impactful for hypertrophy. But there are better reasons than that. Because you're like, oh, a little bit more, but if I do less eccentric, I can do more concentric reps because I save my energy. That's totally true. Slower eccentric has a couple of other benefits that are really, really awesome, and just kind of like, once you know them, you're like, oh, shit, why wouldn't I use this? One of them is that eccentric part of the lift doesn't take as much nervous system drive. So it actually tires you out less. So if you have a set on which you are mostly riding out slow eccentrics and then quickly doing the concentric and then slowly riding out the eccentric, that set is going to fatigue you less than a set in which you're dumping the bar into yourself and just crushing out as many concentrics as you can. Like CrossFit style, that shit is hard. Like it actually just beats you up more from a nervous system perspective. You have to try harder. Your nervous system works harder on a concentric phase than eccentric, which is why EMGs, the little sensory pads they put on you to detect muscular activity, don't seem to detect a whole lot of activity or nearly as much in an eccentric phase as in a concentric. And then they say, well, this doesn't activate that muscle as much. Like, well, it sure shit does. It's just not through the nervous system. But the muscle uses its own passive tension and its own internal tension. With some degree of activation, you can get a ton of force throughput in an eccentric, which means it's a very efficient way to train, a very economical way to train. For how hard you have to try, you get bigger benefits from the eccentric. So that's a big deal. Like, shit, if I can work, like, not nearly as hard. Like, I did all the work to get the bar up here. Why don't I catch all the growth I got coming to me by taking it down slowly? And also, it's going to tire me out less, so I can do more reps and more sets to get the same effect. And then in addition to that, a slow eccentric minimizes injury risk, because injury risk is quite high if you really rapidly change at the bottom or dump the bar and it gets off position. But a slower eccentric keeps you in a very good position. It lowers the velocities of movement, and movement velocities are one of the most correlated variables to injury. Like, one of the most injurious sports is the sport of cheerleading in America. Why? Because when the girls are basket tossed style and come down 10 meters, your velocity hitting the ground at 10 meters is like insanely high. It's higher than you would be able to propel yourself. Your ass is getting hurt for sure. But if you're lowering even hundreds of pounds slowly in an eccentric and you push back up, usually you're just like, I just can't do this anymore. I'm not going to get hurt. But the more dynamic something is, the more injurious it is. So if slowing the eccentric maybe grows a little bit more muscle rep per rep, definitely requires less effort neurologically to train just as hard, and minimizes injury risk, at least a little bit. I'm talking about, all right, there's 3 benefits, and then you say, okay, what are the downsides? You get fewer reps in a set. So, well, I don't know, like the girl over there that's just counting your reps, she's like, all right, if he gets 15 reps with this, I'm for sure giving it up. I'm just going to pull him into the bathroom. We're going to do this. But if it's 14 or less, I'm never going to speak to him again. That doesn't happen. Nobody cares. You know the Jurassic Park meme, the fat guy from Jurassic Park? He's like, see, nobody cares. That's just it. So it ends up being like there are really no downsides from a hypertrophy training perspective, and just like small, notable upsides, but there's like 3 of them. And then that adds up to like, this is a really good idea. It's more, imagine you saw someone walking around with no shoes, and you were like, have you considered shoes? And they're like, is it going to change everything completely? Will I be able to get to where I need to go faster? You're like, no. But trust me, you put on some shoes, they'll make it more comfortable. Your feet don't get hurt as often. Your feet probably won't get hurt very often if you have nice soles, but every now and again they will. So just put on some shoes and see if you like it. And they're going to put on some shoes and be like, bro, this is the next level. This is awesome. And you're going to be like, see, it's not night and day, but it's just better. It's just better. And so, you're like, why not do it? That's just generally my thing. And with injury, if you can bring injury risk down a little bit, like, who wants to get hurt? Why would you want to get hurt? Now, I would understand if there was a nuanced discussion of, now look, like, quick eccentrics have some upsides. But for hypertrophy training, well, gee whiz, they just really don't. You know, it's like if it's all positives and basically no negatives, it's like having friends over and they're like, why isn't your food flavored? And you're like, should I consider flavoring my food? And they're like, yes. There's just, the downside is it costs $1 to buy food flavoring. And the upside is like 1,000,000 times bigger than that. So, ta-da.
When I first thought of doing a podcast in 2019, I wrote down everything that I wanted to achieve with the show. And one thing I never wrote down was to spam you with ads of products that I never really used myself. However, I did write down that I wanted to grow it as big as possible and have as many interesting people on the show as I could. To help make that happen, all I ask is that you leave a review on the podcast platform that you're listening to this episode on and share it with someone that you know it will benefit. If you want to support myself even further, and more importantly, your body transformation, and are interested in having me as your coach to help you achieve the results that you just can't seem to achieve on your own, you can visit teamrockashby.com to see what program fits you best. Back to the show. So what about the soreness aspect of training with slow eccentrics? Because I personally feel that to be much more DOMS, like in my, like for example, yesterday I did a push workout and my chest is like screaming.
Blown up.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's really sore because at the moment I'm doing 4 to 5 seconds like on the way down to really try and emphasize it. Like, is that a trade-off that you consider? Because I definitely don't feel as sore when I have, like, let's say a 2-second lowering of the weight.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think that is indicative of a good thing. And because there's not a ton of direct literature to confirm this yet, I have to be very careful how I say this, but I suspect that the growth benefit of slower eccentrics is actually quite modest, not just small. And I think that reflects itself in the degree of soreness that you get. I challenge you to think of a situation in which more DOMS doesn't correlate to more growth. Have you ever heard of a situation in which someone's getting more DOMS, but that doesn't correlate somehow to the mechanisms of more growth? So, for example, people used to say, well, DOMS is just something you get if you're novel, like new to training. So, okay, who grows more from training? People new to training or people who have been training a while? Okay, new people. Okay, sweet.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Good. Another one is like, you can see if you targeted the muscle properly. If you do a lot of slow eccentrics for your biceps and you don't get sore, you'd be like, am I really using my biceps in this? And maybe it's just forearms. You know, sometimes you curl and it's just mostly forearms and you're like, ah. Another one is like, people used to say, okay, at long muscle lengths, training at a stretch really gives you DOMS. And that's kind of a curiosity of training at a stretch. So don't worry about DOMS because it's just something that happens when you stretch or when you're new. But now we learn that training at a stretch is superior for hypertrophy. So it's like, oh, interesting. And it also conveys a lot of DOMS. So I'm not saying the more DOMS you can get, the better. But if you're getting some good, robust DOMS from doing even less of the work or just the same amount of work, you're probably getting more growth. And that's a really great thing. Can you imagine if I'm all Dr. Mike and shit and you see my videos on YouTube and shit and you're like, I'm going to try the slow eccentric bullshit. I'm going to try it. And instead of you getting more sore from it, you got less sore. You got less tired. You didn't feel like the muscles were really trained all that hard. Would you be more likely to be like, yeah, this is awesome, I love it? No, you'd be like, I don't know, it's not quite hitting the spot. But if you get really, really sore in your quads from doing it or your triceps or your chest, you're like, man, some shit happened to my muscles. This definitely fucks up my muscles a lot. And if you're saying, oh, now I'm too sore, why don't you just do fewer sets? Then now we have a really amazing thing. You do fewer sets and you get as much growth as you used to be getting doing more sets. And you don't have to try as hard from a nervous system perspective because the concentric's more difficult than the eccentric. It might be actually a pretty big deal all around where it's like, you know, something's just so goddamn good, you don't need forever of it to make you super happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm doing less sets than I've probably ever done before. And I feel like, yeah, I'm getting, well, it's hard to say because it's a new phase of training. It's like a new meso that I'm doing. It's hard to say that I'm growing the most I've ever grown, but
you can't say that. Yeah, totally.
As a person that's lifted since I was 14, it's pretty hard to find those extra things that are unturned. So,
yes,
you know, it's feeling very
But
good.
your proxies for how your exercises are making you feel, how your workouts are making you feel, are definitely trending in the right direction. I mean, if you like have to do less work and you get just as fucked up in the target muscle, but your joints feel good, your nervous system feels good, this is a really good sign. If this keeps going, I might see at least comparable growth for less effort, or even more growth if I can recover from it. You know what I mean?
It's just very challenging mentally as well, because you're like, like you feel like you should be smashing yourself harder, especially if you've trained in the gym for a while. You're like, I'm doing 3 sets of 8, 5 seconds down, 1 up, and you're used to doing, what I did when I kind of like originally started the whole, you do 5 by 5 or you do 6 sets of 6, and you're absolutely crushing the bench press. And then, now you're doing 3 sets of 8 and walking out and you feel, just as good. Obviously it feels like a more intelligent way to train. On the aspect of joint pain, I did want to kind of chat to you because you're grappling, and I'm relatively new into it. I'm only a couple years in.
Okay.
But I do get slight elbow tendonitis.
Yeah.
And that really screws up my kind of pull-ups and bench and things like that sometimes, which is just frustrating. How do you manage your grappling and your training? Because you're training a lot. I'm not sure how much you do jiu-jitsu, but you do mention that you do it quite frequently. How do you manage it yourself, if you get any of that?
Yeah. So say I have at least 3 recommendations. One is train with weights in the day before you do jiu-jitsu. If you do jiu-jitsu first and train with weights sometime after, and that same day, you're just non-starter. Your elbows are going to be like, bro, nah.
Yeah, I have to do that. Like, I have to double up, so I do it before. I have done it after when I'm desperate, just to get in some training. But man,
Bro,
even
terrible,
bodyweight
right?
pull-ups, you're like, man,
Dude, you're like, I can't do pull-ups anymore. That's it. And jiu-jitsu finally broke me. That's it.
like I just found myself just circling around machines because it was easier.
Yes.
So I was just like, I'm chest pressing, shoulder pressing, lat pull down, seated row. I'm out.
Yeah, 100%. So definitely lift before. Another recommendation I have is to drill, maybe not necessarily drill, but some combination of drilling and positional sparring more than you do live sparring. Because live work, just going to submission, is very, very effective and very necessary. But especially for folks that are beginning, folks that are working out their game plan, they need lots of repetitions of the same thing. So lots of drilling and lots of positional sparring. The thing is, most people don't like those as much as they do live rolling. I mean, the ideal white belt jiu-jitsu class is that coach just like blows a whistle and says, all right, 40 minutes, just try to kill yourselves and hit it. And, everyone loves that, but you don't really learn a whole lot. And it's just so difficult for the body. It's full-on combat. It's going to beat you up more. So you can get a better stimulus to fatigue ratio from jiu-jitsu training if you do more drilling and more positionals. My wife and I train together right now at jiu-jitsu, and we train basically 3 times a week most weeks, and we only spar once a week for now, but our jiu-jitsu game is just continuously elevating because we drill the other days. And drillers make killers, like that's the thing wrestling came up with, and it's just as true for jiu-jitsu. So that's a really good idea. And the other thing is, I would say, when you're rolling, and this is difficult to do when you're a white belt, but it'll get easier to do as you mature, if you try, is to treat your rolls as opportunities to exhibit technical prowess and cap your use of your strength until you're at a competition. And then in a couple of weeks leading up to the competition, really ease up on your lifting, start to crank your intensity and training a little bit higher for jiu-jitsu and try harder. And then you'll be ready to try hard, but all of the movement patterns will have been there from trying not so hard physically. So here's what I mean by that. If you're, let's say, doing some kind of pass in the gi, do you do gi or no gi?
I prefer no gi, but
no gi, sweet.
I do the occasional gi. It's kind of become a joke now that I'll just kind of show up to gi, but gi. I just prefer no gi.
Collar choked by somebody.
Yeah, like coming from rugby and just, the more dynamic element of it, I prefer it, I do both.
You just want men that are shirtless.
Exactly.
Coming from rugby, you're like, this gi covers up too much of the man that I want to touch. This is gross. So, let's say no gi, you're kind of pushing a pass together, and the person's resisting, and they're kind of following up and trying to hook your legs and keep their guard. And you could get the pass if you simply like pulled harder on their shoulder, just because you're fucking jacked and strong, and you can get the pass doing that. But If you don't do that, they're actually too technical for you because they're weaker and smaller, but maybe they're a blue or purple belt, and they're too technical for you to get the pass just on like smooth technique. There are two ways to get around that. One is you just fucking grind them and you get the pass. Two is you give up the pass and try to work for something else that you are technically proficient in advancing on. One of those lets you win the match and advance the position, which is cool. Congratulations. So pat on your own back. But also it fucks up your elbows because it just grinds on them, man. Like grinding is what hurts you, not jiu-jitsu. Not a lot of people get hurt doing breakdancing, but it looks even more intense than jiu-jitsu, except there's nobody resisting you in breakdancing. It's just you by yourself. So very low injury rate. Those people don't really complain about any kind of joint pain or anything, generally. Sure shit, not elbow pain. But jiu-jitsu, man, you're pushing people away, you're pulling people, you're using one arm to grab something and move around it. And when you're in the fight or flight situation, like, you can grind your out joints real hard doing that stuff. But if you say to yourself, look, if I can't get this with good fluid technique at 50% of my maximum strength, I don't deserve to get it because I don't really know things. Jiu-jitsu isn't about how strong your body is. It's about how much you know of how to move your body. Anytime you want, you can take your strength and start using it, and then you're a fucking killer. Imagine if, like, some girl in your class who weighs 55 kilos or something, and she's tall and lanky, and you're like, but she's like a black belt and she's just a star technician. You can beat her right now just because you could just smash the living fuck out of her. Fine, amazing. But imagine if she took a magic pill, that her jiu-jitsu technique didn't change at all, but now she got your strength. Oh my god, dude, she'd go to Worlds and fuck everyone up. Like, that's it. It would be game over, because she's worked on the most important part of jiu-jitsu, which is the technical ability. You are that girl, except your technical ability sucks and you have the muscles already. You're that girl in reverse. Cool thing is if you train to increase your technical ability, your strength's always going to be there. So for the last little while in my training, I'm working on flow and technical and getting to the right places, because when I have to turn up the strength, it's always there.
Yeah.
But if I always turn up the strength, both fuck up my elbows and shoulders, and I don't learn a ton of technique. Because someone's like, you got that pass, and you're like, I sure did. They're like, that's the wrong way to do the pass. You're like, but it worked. Like, no shit. If you have a bulldozer run over a car, it's the wrong way to pass on the freeway, but it still works because it's just fucking that big. You don't learn anything. Like if you have a tank and you just drive it across the racetrack and crush all the other race cars and you win the race, you don't actually know how to race. You just drive in a straight line, and other cars just blow up when they touch you. Like, you don't learn anything. So with jiu-jitsu, backing off if you're stronger, into such a way that you never hurt your joints, that you just think your elbows after practice, they feel great. Which means, like, look, if you're up against a stronger guy, a bigger guy, and he muscles you, you got to lose. You got to lose the position. You got to lose the match. You got to tap more often. But, when people get a big ego about beating you, that's all in the gym. It's all good. Because when you're peaking for competition, you're going to turn it up on that same person, and they're going to fucking lose to you. And they're going to be, holy shit, you got a lot better. Be like, nah, man, I just never really try all that hard with my strength. And that seems like a cocky thing to say, but, like, you just beat them. So clearly you had some other shit up your sleeve. You know what I mean? So my best recommendation there is, like, train before you do jiu-jitsu, drill more, do more positionals, less live rolling, and when you roll live, don't try to crank on people and use white belt energy. Just try to be technical and smooth so that you'll never get in a position where you're even really taxing your joints a whole lot.
Yeah, I've definitely been trying to work on that. I heard of the idea maybe like 6 months ago when I was, or maybe a year, around positional sparring, starting in disadvantageous positions and then kind of working your way out. That's and now that's actually been one of my favorite ways to train. I guess I've kind of looked at it similar to training, lifting weights.
Yeah,
it's about technique. And
well, imagine if you use that opposite philosophy with weight training. Someone's like seeing you do a tricep push down with 100 pounds, and they're like, can't you lift more? We're like, yes, I can put 600 pounds on the rack deadlift and pick that up for 10, but like, that's just me using my whole body like an idiot. I'm not targeting what I want. Technique in jiu-jitsu is the same thing. Can you pick someone up and smash them in jiu-jitsu? Sure, totally. Unless they're really big and strong. And then if they know more technique than you, you have zero weapons. You don't actually know anything. But if you focus on your technique, it doesn't look as impressive. But once your technique gets really groovy, if you're strong and you have good technique, dude, it's lights out. You ever roll against people who are strong, big, and had good technique? Like, it's not a fun time for anyone because you truly feel trapped. Like, you're like, oh my God, I have nothing to go to. I can turn up my strength. They're nullifying that, and their technique makes it seem like they're just not even fucking trying. So that's where you want to be. And as big and strong as you are, give it another 7 or 8 years, you're going to have a black belt, and you're going to be that big and strong, if not bigger and stronger. And then you'll be a real pain in the ass if you learn the techniques from now until then. But if you just get promoted by beating people up and having just a couple of good moves and you just smash people through, you're never really going to be that good. Other black belts will beat you up, and you'll be confused as to why.
Yeah. You mentioned the stimulus to fatigue ratio. I've never thought of it in terms of jiu-jitsu. But you were the first person that I heard that from around hypertrophy.
I think I made it up.
Yeah. I wasn't sure. Like when I first heard it, I was like, oh, well, this is an idea that I've thought about, but not, ever put a name to. Not trying to say that I could have, thought of it, but
no, you sure did. I think it's really obvious.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're like, oh, the exercise that gives you the most for the least, pretty much.
Yes, we do that in the rest of life. Stimulus to fatigue ratio isn't some kind of big discovery or invention of mine, because it's just a modification of the cost benefit formula from like economics or just home economics. Just like being a human being. You're like if some this is a terrible analogy. Is it okay if I say something something a little racy?
Yeah.
Edit it out later.
Yeah, I'm like in agreement with the comments on YouTube. I think it's the best parts of your videos.
Oh, jeez. All right. If you're let's say you want to let's say you're single and you're chatting with a girl or a guy or whatever. It's 2023, right? And you're chatting with them in the DMs, and they're like, "Why don't you come through and we'll hang out?" The benefit there, the stimulus is like, are you going to get happy, touchy fun times? The cost is like, well, it's like, how far do they live? Because, if you're in Melbourne and someone, on the other side of Melbourne is like, hey, you want to come through and do shit? You're like, yeah, fatigue is going to be low. But if you're in Melbourne and someone's like, hey, come to Perth, I'll make it worth your while. Like, Perth. What is the stimulus? What exactly are we going to do? And if they're like have a list of like fun activities for like 3 days straight and they're a professional sex haver, you're like, all right, fine, I'll buy that plane ticket. You know what I mean? But like you got to consider both, because that's how you do. The easier analogy, of course, is like food. If someone's like, hey, like come get a burger at this burger bar, you're not just like, yes. Sometimes you're like, well, how much is it? How good is the burger? Because if they say like the burgers aren't that great, but it's like $50, you're going to be like, dude, what? Why the fuck would I go? Poor stimulus, a lot of fatigue. In other words, poor benefit and not great cost, very high cost. But if someone's like, dude, it's $10 burgers and they're amazing, you're like, well, I'm going to have to try one. So same idea in training. And I think it's just simple. Maybe my talent in the industry hasn't been being exceptionally exotic in my suggestions for how we approach training theory, but maybe my contribution is in part to be kind of simplify training theory back to basics of like, what are we really here for? Like when you're at the gym, if I'm like, hey, like you'll be able to lift a lot of weight with this exercise, is that really a benefit? It seems like one, right? But then you're like, what are your outcome measures? Do you care about how strong you are? A lot of people are like, definitely. And then great for them, it's like awesome strength training. But for a lot of people, Brock, let's be honest, man, they just want to look a certain way. I just want to look like Hugh Jackman from Wolverine, man. That's the only reason I've ever wanted to train. Not me personally, just a lot of people say that. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, actually, we don't even know how strong he is, because it fucking doesn't matter. What matters is how stimulated do his muscles get in training, how little fatigue does he accumulate so that he can come back and do the same thing and get the body that he wants and that you want. So if you have some decent proxies for what a stimulus is, you have some decent proxies for what fatigue is, you might as well do the stuff that makes the most sense. And that's it.
Yeah. Actually, I started training. One of my big inspirations was I watched 300 when I was like 12. Or 14. It was just pretty much
great time to watch 300.
Pretty much just to look like Leonidas.
Oh yeah, you should have had CGI abs or whatever he had.
Yeah,
but
it was funny. Me and my friend used to Google the Spartan Workout because we were super young, and we used to do it in the lounge, and it was like jump lunges, Hindu push-ups.
So stupid. Oh my god!
Man, it was.
And you realize like 4 days of just like modified hypertrophy training would have been the best possible way. Because remember, like you're not trying to train to be a literal Spartan. If that was the case, most of it would be like training with a sword and a shield and shit like that. You're not gonna do that.
Yeah.
You just want to look a certain way, and it's like, what? Why do the 300 guys look good? Because they look close to what men's physique competitors look like. Well, how do those guys train? Well, they're just bodybuilders, man. You're like, oh shit. But when you realize that most of the way you train for looks is really just a certain way to go about it, it's great because it's uncomplicated. It's not great because a lot of people with these weird programs. I remember the 300 program was a huge thing. Everyone Googled that.
Yeah, was
right?
that like 300 reps of all
Dude,
this stuff?
there was like probably 50 of them by different fitness influencers.
Yeah, because I was doing a really shitty one that was like, yeah, you know, like I said, like alternating squat jumps, and me and my friend were like timing
you
our
were doing the worst
period.
one.
Yeah, I did. No
you
weights
stumbled into
included.
the wrong one. I hate it. Oh my god.
Oh, man.
But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, if I actually want this physical appearance, turns out like people really know how to get physical appearance in a way that's very straightforward, and it's almost more boring than you would think. It's like, do you want bigger biceps? Like, yeah, like train the biceps through a full range of motion with eccentric control. You're like, shit. There's not any like shortcut. You're like, oh, this is the shortcut. You're like, fuck. But this isn't that fun. You're like, do you want big biceps or not? It's like, yes, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. Which is another way of like kind of criticizing my own earlier point about celebrities. It would be great to get celebrities like to hear this or hear some version of this, to be like, look, like what really matters to you as a celebrity when you're 12 weeks away from filming your next big movie where you have to look sexy? And they're going to be like, how I look. And right. Do you want to get hurt? Do you want to spend any more time doing it? Do you want to have fun in the gym? And they're like, this is my job, man. My fun is like actually acting and then chilling out with my family and friends. Like, right. So why don't we get you a good coach? We did the guy who was coaching, what's his name? The guy that played Chris Pratt, the guy that was in all the movies recently.
I saw that. That's
Marvel
a new YouTube video.
movies.
I haven't watched it yet.
Yes, but like his coach is great. He's just like does the fucking compound basics and with good technique. And it's like, dude, get a guy like that. Chris Pratt got so fucking lucky. Yeah, but like everyone in Hollywood should have a guy like that, because that guy is going to be like, this is what you want, right? Right? Well, just do it. Let's set it up, and that's it. Like if you want like a wireless internet installed in your house, and some no nonsense company comes in and it's like, we're going to put a fucking port here, here, and here. It's going to cost you $20 a month. Here you go. We turned it on. You're like, amazing. That's what training is like. We know how to train people really well, but not everyone shopping for training knows what they're looking for, unfortunately.
Quickly, because I know you have to bounce pretty soon. I know you kind of talked about the simple way that you kind of encourage training, and that's probably your biggest contribution. I agree. Like I see some of your workouts that you do, and you're doing like 4 exercises, you know, sometimes even 3, and I'm like, man, to someone else coming from doing all this random F45y type of training, that looks extremely boring.
Yeah.
Like, what's your advice to them? Because I'm similar, you know, I might program 5 exercises, you know, 3 sets of this and that to people, and they're like, hey Brock, like, is this it? And then they're like, oh, and I have to repeat this for 4 weeks. Like, I'm usually doing something different every day.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people for that?
Yes. That's a great question, Brock. My first piece of advice would be, you want to try to think about how much fun you want to have in the gym versus how much you want to optimize for results. Now, for me, I'm a competitive bodybuilder. If I take 5th place at a show, and if I had less fun in prep, I could have taken 3rd. What the hell was I doing? On the bodybuilding stage, they're not like, all right, your physique looks good, but how much fun were you having? It's nonsense. So I don't care about how much fun I have. To me, it's the most fun to optimize, right? So my fun assessment comes after I say, okay, this is optimal. This is what's fun to me. But for other people, it doesn't work that way. There's a very fine way to answer honestly. Say, look, it absolutely results are important to me, but like results are 90% of what I'm after, but like 10%. If I lose 10% of results, opportunity cost-wise, but I can do something 100% more fun, I'm there. Great. Then it's like, okay, dope. Then you have a second thing to do, is to learn what the fundamental elements are of proper training, arrangement, proper programming, so that you know how to include the most fun without costing yourself the most effect. So, for example, doing a different exercise every week costs you a little bit of an upside, not a huge one. As long as that exercise is a stable exercise with a full range of motion, a deep stretch, and eccentric control, and it's done properly. So that's okay. That's a fine variation. You don't really cost yourself a ton. You cost yourself a little bit of optimality, but it's way fun because you get to do a different exercise every week. On the other hand, it's like if you do a different exercise every week, but also you're doing like Bosu balls and one-legged unstable squats, it's like, well, actually, that choice reduces your results significantly, and it increases how much time you have to spend at the gym, and also the bad stuff. And then it's like, okay, well, that is a trade-off that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So if it's going to make something, way more fun for you, then do it as long as you're comfortable with the optimality trade-off. And a lot of times the optimality trade-off is very small. But if it's like you're doing something way ineffective just so it's fun, like people who like to do like planks and holds and shit like that, and they're like 35% body fat, you're wasting your time almost completely. Like, you're 30% fat. If you cut down to 25% fat, however many plank holds you did with your abs, it's not going to make any difference in your appearance. I mean, zero, because there's 18 layers of fat. You know what I mean? So it's like, you just shouldn't do that at all. And they're like, okay, but like, it's fun. Like, sweet. Is there any way we can get you to have fun doing shit that's effective? Like lateral raises with different technique than last week. They're like, okay, great. So that navigating that, so you as a coach and the people who have you as a coach, if they say, hey, like, this is really boring for me, you can give them some options. We can make it more fun in 3 different ways. And I'll tell you, one of them is going to cost you 5% of your potential results, the other 10, the other 15. Which ones do you want to choose? Because if it really fun is super important to you, 15%. But then again, Brock, if you tell your clients that, after 8 or 16 weeks, they tell you, they come back and they're like, dude, my body's changed. I love it. And they might be like, I want more results though. You go, okay. Do you still want to do that 15% efficient method, or 85% efficient rather? Or do you want to bump it up to 90 or 95 or 100? And then they might have a different answer, because they might, once people know how much work it takes to get the body that they want or close to it, once they taste what their visual appearance and health and feeling can be like when they're closer to their achievement potential, they might be like, dude, this is the shit I really like. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's a weird analogy, but like, if you're like just doing things for fun and passion, you're not really into making money, it's totally dope. But then if you discover you're pretty good at something and it pays you a lot, like if you discover you're really great at singing and now you have a record deal and they're like, you just keep putting out more songs, you get $250,000 a song. You're like, all of a sudden I'm really interested in writing songs. And they're like, I thought you didn't like to make money. You're like, yeah, when I wasn't making that shit much, I didn't care. But this much money, your boy's in the studio 24/7 laying down bars. I'm doing nothing else. And it's like, it's genuine. You really want to be there because like, I'm in now. So sometimes when people don't have abs or crisp, midsection, they work for 16 weeks with you. They get your diet coaching, they get your training coaching. They start to see their abs. And they're like, is there a way I can speed this up? And you're like, I'm glad you asked. We actually had that talk 16 weeks ago. Remember, you chose the slower method? They're like, I did. You're right. Fuck that. Science only. I want the shit that makes my abs pop the most. I want the biggest biceps. I've had a taste. I want more. And they're like, sweet, welcome to modern periodization. And then they train like a machine. And when people tell them, like, in the gym, they're like, I saw your workout. It looks really boring. They go, oh, hold on a sec. Boom, pull up their abs, middle finger, fuck off. Because then that person's like, oh yeah, you're right. Why the hell would I? Like, if you see someone really jacked and lean training, you could say it's boring, but you never tell them that. Because what are they going to tell you? They're going to be like, do you like what you see? And you're like, yeah. Next you're going to tell me I have to do boring shit to look like that. Yeah. They're like, yep. And you're like, shit. So everyone kind of knows. Now some people, they might still be like, look, I still want that 85% method. I still want more fun. I love my results. I'm okay to get them a little slower though. I like where this is going. Then that's great. It just has to be a known choice. What you don't want is people who are like, I want the fun things, but they just don't know it comes at a trade-off. Or the people that are like, I have to do the boring things or I'll see zero results. That's bullshit. You can do a lot of really fun stuff and get great results. It just won't be your best. But that brings us back to the celebrity thing again. It's kind of like, you're going to be in a movie and the whole world is going to see you half naked. Don't you want to do your best? I memean, god damn. Sometimes those people just don't know. So if they know, all is well. If they don't know the trade-offs, not great.
Yeah, I recently, actually, I had a celebrity that I trained, and she was actually getting ready for a movie. That's why I'm like, pretty interested in it as well. But there's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of, things that people will say famous friends or, people that recommend this best personal trainer or best physio. And, she was gobsmacked that she could put her knees over her toes when I told her. And I was like,
yeah, of course.
Mate,
most
I don't
people
know
will
what's
be
happening here.
Yeah, she's probably like, ontological shock from realizing the Matrix is real. Like, what, everything's been a lie? But if you can't depend on knees over toes being a bad thing, what can you depend on? Is Australia really on the south side of the world? Who knows? Maybe we've had the map upside down the whole time.
Yeah. All right, Mike. It's time for you to go. you've given me a lot of time, mate. I appreciate it. Where can people find you? Do you want to, leave them with anything? What are you up to next, or what are you building? I know that you're always working on the hypertrophy app.
Yep. It's available for purchase. You just go to my Instagram links or go to our YouTube, and every video has a link to the app. And where they can find us is really on YouTube. Just YouTube Renaissance Periodization or Mike Israetel, or just take a picture of this podcast on your phone and have it image search my gigantic ugly face, and you'll see where I'm located on YouTube. And then you will have lots of fun. But don't let your kids listen to the channel because it's for adults.
Yeah, I second that.
Excellent. Brock, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a huge pleasure.
Thanks, man. Thank you very much. Cheers, mate.
Of course.